I promise this is an art video. What's up everybody, this is the Shady Champ with a third installment of Artist Reacts. If you see my channel then you know that I mostly post gameplay videos on here. It's a great way to work on video editing skills, and whenever I find myself with a good idea and having time, I draw a thumbnail for some of those videos. So I want to go over these thumbnails because they also happen to be just some of the most recent pieces that I've had. And if you tune to the end, then I've got a final comparison of how far I have come from the first video's time to now in its entirety. So we start off with my Persona 5 thumbnail made for an April Fool's video where the joke was that instead of actual Persona 5 Royal Canon gameplay, I would play the game Tycoon in the Thieves' Den. When I recorded the game, it was Akechi that had given me the most trouble, so it was only fitting and very marketable that the thumbnail be of Joker and Akechi. I used Akechi's Robin Hood outfit because the all-out attack pose could be made to look as if he was throwing the playing cards in the air. That and the Robin Hood outfit with the white makes for a much better contrast with that of Joker's outfit, and in the Black Mask outfit there would have been way too much black in the overall piece. Speaking of Joker, he definitely gave me some trouble with both the domino mask and his hair. The domino mask was handled through practice before I attempted the thumbnail. As for the hair, I settled on drawing various strands of hair before I actually created the outline for his bedhead. I do think Joker's head is a smidge too wide and the pupils in Joker's eyes stand out a bit too much, but otherwise this makes for a really good Persona 5 thumbnail. Now we go into the thumbnails made for SpiderManShattered Dimensions. I start off with a Deadpool parody cover of the game, tracing the cover to more accurately pay homage. There was no Deadpool Noir, so I had to settle for Deadpool Pulp, as I believe that story was set in the past. Then, the Shattered Dimension thumbnails were being created around the same time, so I hop from thumbnail to thumbnail doing the sketches and the line arts before I get to coloring, doing a thumbnail for Spider-Man vs. Juggernaut as well, and Spider-Man Noir vs. Green Goblin Noir. I made it a practice to make the sketches with a much thicker pencil than the ink. It lets the line art feel a bit sleeker to me, just a quick visual trick. I was going to do a sketch for Dr. Octopus 2099, but I found that I had already made a thumbnail from that game for that video, so I decided to stick to the videos that didn't have a thumbnail. Spider-Man gave me a lot of trouble thanks to those webs of his. We duplicate Juggernaut's flats and smudge them, plus a slight motion blur to show him zooming past Spidey. Now it's time for the highlights and shades and eventually the colored lines for the extra rendering. I also want to point out the soft brush gets a great improvement on both coloring and blending. If I'm going to use it not being that good initially as an excuse for me, then it's only right for me to call out when it actually does start working pretty well. Or I guess when I start using it properly. I don't really like creating backgrounds still at this point, so I don't really give it my all here, especially as I was always going to intend to blur it to focus on Spidey and Juggernaut, but they did honestly deserve a little more attention than I gave it in hindsight. We put a color dodge filter on Deadpool to imitate the shading on that cover. And it honestly wouldn't be a covering featuring Deadpool without a fourth wall break. Add the stamps of my name and then we move on to another early piece for comparison purposes. So, when I wanted to build confidence with making my own pen strokes, I decided to make a self-portrait, but it wouldn't be an old piece that we're talking about without some mistakes. This particular mistake came from the lines just being way too thick, even though at this point we do bring back the pressure controls and I think we lower the stabilization, the lines are still just way too thick, to the point where the piece honestly can't help but be flat. And the coloring's getting to a point where I can only blame the blending tool for so much. At a point you just gotta accept that it's me here. It's a lot of my experience just not coming out the way that I wanted to for these pieces. And this was definitely a piece that made me have to sit down and figure out what's working, what's not working, what improvements I should make, what artists that I like, what do they do, and how can I use what they do to make my stuff better and work on it from there and keep going, and what's the right line weight and like all of that stuff. Right? And I know I sound incredibly hard on my piece and all the earlier pieces that I made in the first video of this series, but I get that. But it's just one of those things where once you grow and once you get better, once you get older and all that jazz, you look at the earlier works that you made and you go, LOL, I don't do that no more, and I'm so happy about that. Because 3 or 4 years later from this piece, I'm actually able to do something as dope as this. Shin Megami Tensei 4 is one of my favorite games of all time, for reasons that are far too long to get into, especially for a video like this. So much so that the next time that I would take a true stab at a self-portrait, and no shame to my YouTube and Twitch icons, but I really want to flex some creative muscle here, so the next time that I wanted to make art of myself, I knew it had to be in reference to this game, especially due to the nature of choosing multiple endings, meaning for me, multiple accounts and social medias could have one of the multiple images that I make. So I made a law route and a chaos route. The law route is pretty straightforward, with me trying to look as heavenly, heroic, and radiant as possible, even though law doesn't necessarily mean good in these games. But meanwhile, the chaos route plays into the anime glasses trope, because I actually wear glasses in real life, even though I don't draw me wearing glasses all that much. Moreover to the improvements, my line work is markedly better, as well as my grasp on color here. I stick to more cell shading here, but in place of blending I use the ink bleed brush for the shades. I also add a few textures here and there and play with colors and layers, and in a few hours I made pieces that would have made me, from the 4 years ago, that boy's jaw would have shattered on the floor. This moment is a huge reason that I wanted to do this, because growth over years is an incredibly hard thing to measure in the moment until you actually stare it in the face by looking at your old stuff versus looking here now. Do I still have a long way to go? Of course, who doesn't if you're making art? But honestly, knowing how far I came lets me know how much further that I can go. On that note, it is time for us to end our video. There's going to be a bonus episode, of course, but as far as narratives are concerned, this series of Artist Reacts is at a close, and we're going to be back to regularly scheduled gameplay until the next time that I have a bunch of art to talk about. As usual, thanks for watching, and leave those likes, subscribes, and more importantly, comments to me and other artists below.